Tracy Sabol tonight on EWTN News Nightly. Abortion in the U.S. A federal appeals court weighs in on a widely used abortion drug. Out in the open, analysis of recently leaked documents that include highly classified military information. The Good Samaritan. Pope Francis delivers a message of hope to a group of Catholic healthcare workers. And reaching out. A closer look at the Italian synagogue that has hosted the past 3 popes. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks for being with us on the feast of Pope St. Martin I. Our top story tonight. A federal appeals court preserves access to the abortion drug mifepristone. However, the judges have imposed several restrictions. In a 2-to-1 vote last night, the panel of judges affirmed the dangers and deadly risks of the chemical abortion drug and reduced the period of pregnancy when that drug can be used. In addition, the drug can also no longer be dispensed by mail. The case is now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, Vice President Kamala Harris released a statement just today saying that the Justice Department has already announced that they are seeking emergency relief from the Supreme Court. And as the abortion pill works its way through the courts, pro-life groups applaud the latest ruling by the Fifth Circuit, one group calling it a landmark win for women and girls. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Good evening to you, Tracy. SBA Pro-Life America also said today, quote, the court recognized that the abortion pill is dangerous and rolled back Biden's reckless mail-order abortion scheme, end quote. The White House, however, sees it much differently.
The White House addresses the abortion pill court battle during a press conference in Dublin, Ireland.
We believe that the law is on our side and we will prevail. So that I can reassure the American people that is our commitment to women, millions of women across the country.
But pro-life groups like Students for Life write, corporate abortion has hidden behind talking points for decades, ignoring the risks of deadly chemical abortion pills as they have weaponized and weakened the medical standards to favor abortion industry interests. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is on an extended trip to Ireland, ringing a peace bell during his visit with the country's president. And later, meeting with the Irish Prime Minister. All this before addressing Irish lawmakers.
So today, I'd like to reflect on the enduring strength of the connections between Ireland and the United States. A partnership for the ages.
And back in the U.S., Vice President Kamala Harris welcomes a group of wounded warriors to the White House, taking part in the annual Soldier Ride, praising them for how they inspire Americans and people around the world.
So to our wounded warriors and to our riders, you represent the best of who we are.
Also today, the White House says it welcomes restored diplomatic ties between 2 Middle Eastern countries, Bahrain and Qatar. And it's criticizing North Korea for its latest missile test. Japan briefly urged residents on a northern island to evacuate. The U.S. writing, this launch is a brazen violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and needlessly raises tensions and risks destabilizing the security situation in the region.
Also tonight, hundreds of thousands of immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children will be able to apply for Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act's health insurance exchanges. President Biden making that announcement today regarding so-called dreamers. And states reluctant to expand Medicaid are likely to push back on the president's move. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Our U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein of California is asking to be temporarily replaced on the Judiciary Committee while she recovers from shingles. 2 House Democrats have called for Feinstein's resignation. No date has been set for her return to Washington. And her absence has complicated Democratic efforts to confirm President Joe Biden's nominees for federal courts. Well, the FBI says it has arrested a suspect in the leaking of classified military documents. The suspect, a 21-year-old man, is a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. The U.S. intelligence community and lawmakers continue to assess the depth of the damage. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
The leaked Pentagon documents published on the chat app Discord with 150 million viewers exposes the extent of U.S. eavesdropping on allies and foes. A former undercover CIA operations officer tells me he fears the leaks jeopardize the safety of sources both here and abroad.
If a source is discovered, they could be killed. And this information that leaked from the Pentagon, unfortunately, it would point out to sources and methods. It would also make our job very difficult and would have our sources doubting our ability to protect them.
Joseph Assad also tells me he believes Russia or China is behind the leak or may have paid insiders to put the information on the internet to drive a wedge between the U.S. and its allies, a belief shared by Senator Chris Murphy, who sits on the Foreign Relations Committee.
Clearly, this is a growing problem, the ability of our adversaries to be able to get confidential or classified information and leak it as a means of embarrassing United States government leaders or candidates. It's something I think we're going to have to grapple with in a very serious way going forward.
The Justice Department is investigating the extent of the leak, and the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner, is pressing them to do more.
The Department of Justice is not being forthcoming here. They're not being fully disclosing, but what they have disclosed right now shows no imminent national security threat from any of the documents that have been released to Congress.
One thing's for sure, this leak is a giant step backwards for U.S. relations. Assad said he's also concerned about the leaked documents which state Egypt plans to sell thousands of missiles to Russia.
Egypt, as we know, is the second largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid, something at the tune of $2.1 billion a year that Egypt receives from the United States.
But in the same breath, Assad tells me U.S. government officials are still trying to determine whether or not some of the documents are fake. Both House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have requested classified briefings for all members when Congress returns next week. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And with us now in the studio to discuss is John Elliott, managing partner of the Brighton Strategy Group and former chief spokesman for the National Security Council. John, great to have you with us. We appreciate it.
Tracy, it's great to be back under admittedly not great circumstances for the intel community.
Yeah, John, let's dive right into this. I mean, a lot of questions surrounding all this. And one big question a lot of people are asking is how did this young man, this 21-year-old who seemingly doesn't have a high security clearance, maybe he does, how did he gain access to all of this?
Well, I would assume we were just learning about his arrest tonight, but the fact is that this is something you have to rely on people at times who are young people, and look, they do a very good job, and a lot of them are entrusted. First of all, they go through really extensive background checks, and it would be very surprising if this individual did not have the highest level clearance, because the documents that were released, if you look at the 100 documents, those are the only ones that we know so far, they are at the highest levels of classification. Once again, to your question, we do rely sometimes on young people. It can't always be, you need, in other words, foot soldiers, you need people on the technical side to help get it to the decision makers. And it seems here this was somebody who pretty low rank in the Air National Guard. He's not active duty Air Force. He might have been activated for the active duty. But the bottom line, you would never quite see somebody in the National Guard having this type of a level of access. So presumably he was involved in getting that material to the decision maker, and he decided then to take it and leak it in some way. It sounds like if he's the only one who really took it out, and this is a rogue act by one person, that's good. That's a lot better for us than if this were something that were calculated. And to Senator Murphy's point earlier, they're very quick to blame other countries right now, when really we need to start looking at our own people and really tamping down and clamping down on our access to classified information, because this is the worst intelligence leak in over a decade.
Yeah, and what does that say? I mean, what's that say about us, within the military and intelligence, but also our national security? I mean, what kind of danger does this pose? Well,
there's a clear danger, mainly because two things. Number one, it exposes some of our means of communication and the level of access that we may have in certain cases to some of the countries that this intelligence is talking about, because it's not just Ukraine, it's not just Poland, it's not just Egypt. It's in some cases Israel, in some cases South Korea, and others. And so what it does is it sort of gives a flag to them. Hey, look, we better be very, very careful. And so it shuts off. And those are just our allies. Then if you look at some that we're in conflict with, whether it's the Chinese or the Russians, they'll be able to say, hey, we really need to watch out about communicating in this way or that way because of the extent of our capabilities. So it does reveal those capabilities. And the second thing that it does, it damages our relationship, separate from giving the sources and methods that this does, but the actual intelligence itself really makes it difficult for us to continue to cooperate with our allies when they find something like, let's say that we've been exaggerating the capability of the Ukraine forces on the one hand, or let's say that we've been working with the South Koreans to have them work around their laws and somehow fund the Ukrainian war when their law apparently doesn't allow them to do that. But we're actually working with them according to these documents. So the less we know, the less that gets out about these, the better. I'd say one more thing, Tracy, about this, that while we're talking about this particular aspect, is that, look, accountability is one of the most important things, not only in the military, but in our government. And so for something that's this big of a leak, it's not just a partisan matter. President Trump was very tough on his people. He fired different cabinet secretaries for things that were way, way below this. And then you had President Obama, to his credit, he fired a couple generals that were over in Afghanistan when things weren't going well there. He held them accountable. They didn't resign in disgrace, but he just said, we need new leadership. And then if you look back in the Bush administration, there were a couple instances where they took the top of the Air Force and also the top of the Department of the Army for the Walter Reed, remember, where the families weren't being taken care of. Those people were out right away. And so right now we've had Afghanistan, we've had another lapse. This is the biggest lapse, and nobody's been held accountable. If Biden really wants to show that he's serious here, there'd be some heads rolling.
Yeah, we don't have much time left, John. I could talk about this for a while, about 30 seconds left or so. But I want to get to something else. You just wrote an op-ed for the National Review. Quickly tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, this was this disastrous briefing on Afghanistan that, look, I don't mean anybody any in judgment or whatever, but the fact is that this White House, instead of putting the president out the way the last administration did, President Trump spoke to the press all the time. What happens here is Biden punts big announcements like this Afghanistan report to his spokespeople, and when that puts them in a tough position because there are a lot of missteps. They don't know how to defend that, and it'd be better not to have a briefing and wait till the president comes back and have him do it personally, because that's what happened under Trump.
Well, John, always great to have you on and get your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tracy. Great to be here.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including keeping children safe, how one group is advocating for the vulnerable in war-torn Ukraine. The Justice Department is calling for no jail time for an abortion activist who was arrested after vandalizing a Catholic church. The transgender man was charged with a hate crime following the incident last summer in Bellevue, Washington. Multiple reports say the DOJ is calling for 3 years probation. A new report says there has been a 6% decrease in abortions since Roe v. Wade was overturned. According to numbers released by a pro-abortion group, the average number of monthly abortions in the United States is a little more than 77,000. In the 2 months before Roe was overturned, that number was more than 82,000. And the states that reported the largest decrease in abortions were Texas and Georgia. Lawmakers in Nebraska have advanced a measure to ban abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected. The bill still faces 2 more rounds of debate. There is also an amendment being considered to ban abortion after 12 weeks. Well, children are among the most vulnerable. That holds especially true in war-torn countries. Since the war in Ukraine began more than a year ago, millions of people have been displaced, the overwhelming majority women and children. What's more, according to recent figures by UNICEF, 500 children have died since the full-scale conflict began. However, those numbers are likely higher. And one group that is calling on the international community to help and provide greater protection for young people living amid the conflict is the nonprofit KidSafe. CEO Randy Thompson joins us now. Randy, great to have you with us today. I know you know firsthand the impact that this war is having on families and children in Ukraine. Tell us more about that and how your organization is helping.
Look, kids are really the most affected by this war because they don't know what's going on. And so think of yourself if you were a child, particularly if you didn't have a parent to guide you, to help you, to stand with you. It's terrorizing. So obviously our concern when the war first started was we needed to help the women and the children to get to safety. My organization, KidSafe, has been working in Ukraine since 2016 to move children without families into loving homes. So when the war started and the Russians attacked first in Mykolaiv and Kherson, that's where we were working. And so we moved quickly to get those kids out and then found there was such a need to move more people. So in the first 6 months of the war, we moved more than 30,000 people out of combat area, almost 14,000 of them children. We also, provided 1,800 tons of humanitarian aid. And we were most concerned about those kids without families. We were able in the first 6 months to move 500 children out of Mykolaiv into safety out of combat. And that's been our concern, that children are dying in the middle of this war. We have to get them to a place where they're going to be safe.
And
today,
I'm sorry,
yes,
Randy, go ahead.
No, today, the situation's changed some. There were people exiting in great numbers before, but now Ukrainians are beginning to come back, which is on the whole a great thing. But now our needs are changing. We have to work, and our governments, all the governments of the world, have to work to make sure that people can live safely in those homes and be ready and poised to protect them should the escalation, get more in the summer months, which many people say it's going to. There's going to be a much greater offensive from the Russians in the summer months. So we're trying to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I know that you work to provide opportunities for older children who are in foster care in orphanages. Tell us more about that. And I know it's not just in Ukraine.
No, our primary goal is to get kids into loving families or connected to caring mentors so that they have someone to walk beside them as they exit care. In Ukraine in particular, we have a program, it's called Pathways to Success, that works with kids that are aging out of orphanages and helps them by giving them both the opportunity for work skills and also a mentor to guide them. And we've been continuing to do that even during the war. And that's an area where we need to, as a country, as governments around the world, we have to really start to prioritize those kids because they're going to be the future of Ukraine.
Absolutely. What would you like to see the international community do? I mean, you're only one organization and can only do so much.
Of course. The international community, in fact, I was in a conference all day today about business and government, private-public sector partnerships working to help to rebuild Ukraine. You can't wait. I mean, the war may go on for a while, but we have to start now to prepare to help this nation to continue to move forward. And my area, of course, is children. So we're asking that the international community, that the U.S. government prioritize the needs of these vulnerable kids and make sure that in all of these billions of dollars of aid packages, that in addition to providing weaponry, that we're really working to help to heal the kids. We're working on developing trauma therapy and training trainers everywhere so that the children, when they come in from these conflicts, are able to start to heal. We think that there should be, much more priority on getting kids into families so that children are not growing up in orphanages. Before the war, there were more than 100,000 kids living in orphanages. We don't want that to continue going forward because, again, they could be the engine to rebuild, or they could be what really brings Ukraine down. And Ukraine has done so much. The people are so ready to move forward that we need to help them to be able to help themselves.
Randy, we have probably about 10 seconds left, but quickly, how can we help and where can we go for information?
Well, you can go to kidsafe.org, and please, if people would consider donating, we have a real crisis right now. The Ukrainian government has asked us to bring 50 children who are living in shelters in these potential combat areas to a new miracle center that we're building. And we're working really hard to get the beds and the facilities ready so that we can actually keep these kids safe over the coming months. So please, people can go on our website, they can donate. They can also share the word with others that Ukrainian children still need help. It's very important.
Absolutely. Randy, thank you so much for coming on. God bless you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, humble beginnings. The Orthodox Church prepares for the Easter season. Plus, Good Samaritans. The Holy Father gives a special thanks to a group of Catholic healthcare workers. Orthodox faithful around the world are marking the start of Easter. In Jerusalem, the Holy Thursday liturgy includes the traditional washing of the feet. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch washed the feet of priests as part of the Holy Thursday liturgy. Most Orthodox churches use the Julian calendar, meaning Easter for them is this weekend. And in Bosnia, the Orthodox faithful began the countdown to Easter with prayer, fasting, and several liturgies. Celebrations took place inside this church, originally built in the 16th century. It was later rebuilt after being destroyed in the mid-1990s. So Pope Francis says people who are dealing with illness should never feel alone.
Cura di coloro che sono scartati dall'economia sanitaria e da una certa cultura contemporanea.
In remarks at the Vatican to members of a Catholic medical organization, the Holy Father said those who work in healthcare are like the Good Samaritan, and they provide what is needed to get people back on the right path. He added that two important parts of healing are consolation and hope. Well, it was 37 years ago that a pope visited a synagogue for the first time in history. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Colin Flynn tells us more about this anniversary and the other pontiffs who have repeated the same gesture.
On April the 13th, 1986, Saint John Paul II visited the synagogue in Rome. For the first time in history, a pope crossed the threshold of the great temple, making a gesture that his successors would later repeat. The chief rabbi of Rome, Elio welcomed St. John Paul II, expressing lively satisfaction with the visit, describing it as a gesture destined to go down in history. In his speech, St. John Paul II explained how the Jewish religion was, in a way, intrinsic to the Catholic religion. Quote, "We therefore have relations with you that we don't have with any other religion. You are our beloved brothers, and in a certain way, one could say our elder brothers," the then Pope affirmed. For many Jews, Karol Wojtyła remains the pontiff who did the most to initiate fruitful Jewish-Christian dialogue. He had many Jewish friends in his Polish youth, and his memory had been forever marked not only by communism, but also by the tragedy of World War II and the deportation of Israelites to Nazi concentration camps, especially Auschwitz, which stood on Polish territory.
Invoco dal Signore il dono prezioso della pace.
24 years later, on January the 17th, 2010, Pope Benedict XVI went to the synagogue, emphasizing the path of friendship between Jews and Catholics that was started during the Second Vatican Council. In his speech, Pope Benedict XVI remembered the tragedy of the Shoah and expressed hope that the wounds of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism would be healed forever, pointing to the recognition of the one God.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, sono felice di trovarmi oggi con voi.
In 2016, on the anniversary of Benedict XVI's visit, Pope Francis went to the synagogue and spoke. Jews and Christians, the Holy Father said, must feel that they are brothers, united by the same God and by a rich common spiritual heritage. The pontiff's visit, in a way, concluded a journey of closeness, which had begun with the apostolic journey to Israel in 2014, and with the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, which laid out the grammar of fraternal and fruitful dialogue between Jews and Catholics, a dialogue taking from theology and ethics that aimed at promoting peace and understanding of people of different faiths, which is still followed to this day. In Rome, Colin Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.